This is Seoul, a bustling city where people go about their lives peacefully. But then bam! A nuke strikes the city, obliterating everything into smithereens. It's the day of doom for Seoul, and it felt like the end of the world. But what happens next is a story for later. 3 years before that nuke, there was someone who knew a catastrophe was coming. So, that person started preparing for the end of the world in advance, planning to survive whatever was coming. Due to monsters having started to ravage the earth, he knew that an irreversible end was on the horizon, and it was a topic of common conversation everywhere at that time. However, only two groups really prepared for the crisis. One was the ultra-wealthy elite, so rich they could buy anything they wanted, always focused on their comfort. On the other hand, there were people with only a limited amount of cash, so their main strategy was to gather knowledge on how to survive. And our protagonist in this story, Park Q, is definitely part of the latter group. So, first things first, he sold off everything he owned and dove headfirst into survival guides like they were the latest binge-worthy show. The first thing he figured out is how to choose the perfect spot for his shelter. After a lot of head-scratching and map poking, he grabbed his marker and highlighted a spot that seemed just right for his bunker. Now, Park had a few must-haves for his dream bunker location. It had to be in a place so sparsely populated that even a herd of lost tourists wouldn't stumble across it. But it still needed to be close enough to the city, so he wouldn't feel like he was living on the moon. It also had to be defensible in case of emergencies. And the third, and probably most crucial factor, was his wallet. With his cash flow resembling a trickle rather than a river, splurging on prime real estate was out of the question. So, he had to get creative and stick to a tight budget. In the end, Parky Q chose a secluded forest near the Air Force Base in the suburbs of Seoul. He bought land that was adjacent to a grumpy old farmer's plot, and this stingy old guy went by the name Mr. Kim. With his spot picked out, Parky hired a construction crew who, let's be honest, looked more like a gang of streetwise misfits than actual workers. Nonetheless, Parky managed to gather all the equipment for the job and promised these guys to help them in work. At first, they weren't thrilled about having him join in the work, but after a few drink parties and some good-natured bonding, they ended up getting along just fine. The plan was ready to roll, or so Parky thought. That was until Mr. Kim decided to play the role of the neighborhood grump. He scolded the crew for littering and making noise, and even had the nerve to question whether our boy Park had the proper permits to start construction. Parky had no idea what Mr. Kim's deal was, but he pressed on with the construction anyway. Unfortunately, the old man was like a stubborn speed bump on their plans. Some of the construction workers wanted to take the old man out by force, but Parky told them to cool their jets. He figured he'd handle Mr. Kim himself if things came to a head. Days went by, and Parky's patience was wearing thin. Then one day, while strolling around, he saw something interesting. People from the city were giving Mr. Kim a hard time. It turned out that Mr. Kim's son was throwing a fit because his father had given away priceless land to his daughter. The son was so mad he was practically frothing at the mouth. He yelled at his old man to sell the useless land and even tried to slap him around a bit. That's when Parky stepped in. He gave the greedy son a look that could freeze the hell, and the son decided it was a good time to make a hasty exit. After a few more threats, he sped off in his car, leaving our boy and Mr. Kim to figure things out. After that, both of them sat down for a chat. During their conversation, we learned that our boy's parents had already passed away in an accident. Park advised the old man to just sell his land since it's too much for him to manage alone. But Kim remains quiet for a moment, then reveals that the land he gave to his daughter is also considered worthless, just like the plot Park is working on. But, as fate would have it, a 10-lane road ends up being built right in front of it. And as for this land, he can't sell his current land because it holds special memories of someone dear to him, and he doesn't want to let those memories slip away. After that, he leaves, and for some reason, he never interferes with our boy's construction again. Days pass, and as the seasons change, the day of catastrophe arrives, hitting Seoul unexpectedly. Even out in the countryside, Park is caught off guard by the blast. As the deafening roar fills the heavens and the delayed air raid sirens announce the end of the world, Park realizes that the nightmare is now a reality. As he runs to his bunker, completely out of breath, Mr. Kim comes rushing after him and begs our boy to help locate his son, who is stuck in Seoul. Park has already checked the news on his laptop and has to break the devastating news to Mr. Kim. His son is already gone. Mr. Kim falls silent, unsure of what to do next. Parky tells him that another attack is likely coming soon and urges him to take shelter in the bunker. But the old man simply shakes his head and says he's not leaving his home. He turns and walks away, leaving Park to prepare for the impending disaster. The horns blare once again, and the catastrophe hits the city without warning. Inside the bunker, Park receives a phone call from a worker named Wang-soo Ki. But as he turns on his computer, he sees the man outside with a sharp axe in hand, one of the workers Park had been with. The man seems to be trying to break into the bunker, fighting against Parky to claim it for himself. We then also discover that Mr. Kim took his own life before the catastrophe struck. On the other hand, determined to protect his shelter, Park grabs his axe and prepares to deal with the intruder at his doorstep. He knows that anyone who survived this apocalypse is now a potential enemy. Before we see the showdown between Park and his uninvited enemy, the scene shifts to the past, when Park was still preparing his bunker. One day, Parky goes hunting with Mr. Kim, After taking down their target, the old man proudly boasts about his days in the special forces and the commendations he received for his marksmanship. That's when our boy learns that this old man used to be part of the defense forces, and that hunting rifle he's carrying could be pretty handy in an apocalypse. But he knows it's not enough, which is why he's got his eye on the nearby Air Force base. You see, both Korean and American soldiers are stationed at this base, including hunters who specialize in taking down large monsters. This place is a treasure trove of stockpiled weapons, which is just perfect for surviving an apocalypse. So, Parky has a simple plan in mind. Once the nuke goes off, he'll put on some protective clothing and loot the supplies and weapons from the Air Force base. But before he can go ahead with this plan, he meets Wang-Soo Kim, one of the workers who helped build his bunker. Wang-Soo offers to sell our boy some guns. Turns out, Wang-Soo used to be a gangster in the Chinese mafia. He quit the mafia life and came to Korea to earn some honest money as a laborer. Wang-Soo reveals that many people had died due to attacks by monsters, and nowadays, a lot of people have been spending money on building shelters. Since Parky already has his bunker ready, he knows weapons are the last piece of the puzzle for his future safety. Parky thinks it over and eventually decides to buy some bad boys for himself. When the day of the transaction arrived, we learned that Parky hired a private investigation firm to look into Wang-Soo. It turns out Wang-Soo wasn't just part of any gang, he was with the Shanghai Triads, and he's using his old connections to bring in the goods. The gangster finally shows up and tells Parky to hang tight while his crew brings in the goods. As they wait, Wang-Soo reveals that he has a daughter who just turned 7. He laughs, admitting he has no idea where she gets her troublemaker streak from. And she's quite a handful. Just as they're chatting, the delivery truck arrives. A man unloads a box of weapons, and our boy sees they've got 3 types of 56 assault rifles, 300 rounds of 7.62 ammo, and 3 magazines. Parky grabs one of the rifles and instantly knows these are the real deal. The quality is top-notch, just what he needs to be ready for whatever's coming next. The delivery guys hop back into the truck, and Wang-Soo mutters something in Chinese to his crew, which flies right over Parky's head. The fat man then turns toward our boy, and with a creepy look, he walks up to Parky and asks if he's going to be living alone in that big bunker. The way he says it, Parky can tell he's up to something shady. But our boy doesn't get intimidated and simply replies, "Yes, I'm definitely going to live alone." He then further asks the fatty if he has any problems with that. Park can sense something fishy, so he discreetly reaches into his coat and grabs the weapon he's keeping hidden. He asks the hefty guy if he's got any issues with that, but the hefty guy just laughs it off, saying there's nothing wrong. He then tells the hefty guy he's welcome to crash in the bunker if he wants, since he knows exactly where it is located. Wang-Soo just starts walking away, saying there's no need for that. He's heading China to see his daughter once this job is done and probably won't be coming back. He reassures Parky that he'll still get the ammo and magazines once the payment clears. With that, Wang-Soo speeds off. In the present moment, as the horns blare, Park gets a phone call from Wang-Soo. He looks outside and sees Fatty standing by the bunker with an axe in hand. Parky is pretty sure that with the nuking starting, Wang-Soo needs weapons and a place to stay, which makes this bunker the perfect safe haven for him. He eventually picks up the fatty's call, and the greedy hefty guy tells him he's brought the magazines and ammo and has been waiting outside. Hearing this, Parky grabs his axe and heads confidently toward the bunker entrance. Since his enemy has come alone, our boy figures he can handle him easily. When they're face to face, Wang-Soo doesn't waste any time and lunges at Parky with his axe. But my guy sidesteps the attack and swings his own axe back in retaliation. That one swing was enough to cut the fatty's throat like a pig, and with a second hit to the head, Wang-Soo turned into a bloody mess. Wang-Soo starts begging for mercy, grabbing Parky's legs and pleading to be let live. But my guy makes it clear that's not happening. Even if he spared Wang-Soo now, the guy would just bleed out until he's out cold. Wang-Soo, seeing the writing on the wall, gives Parky the green light to finish him off. And just like that, Wang-Soo's life comes to an end. Suddenly Wang-Soo's phone rings. Parky quickly squats down, rummages through Fatty's pockets, and pulls out the phone. It's a call from Wang-Soo's daughter in China. He reads her message, where she's asking her dad to come home soon. But before Parky can dwell on the emotions, the sirens start blaring again, and he has no time for pointless feelings. After 29 days of the nuking, radiation levels are through the roof. Parky heads to the Air Force base in search of weapons. When he steps inside, he's blown away by the sheer amount of weapons, enough to arm a private army. As he looks around and sees the burned bodies, he realizes that even if Wang-Soo had survived to see this day, he wouldn't have lived long enough to reunite with his daughter, because no one can survive this messed up place. In the next scene, Parky is fiddling with some limited materials, trying to make toys. He's watching a broadcast on his computer to guide him through it. Turns out, the video isn't from before the war, but was uploaded to an online community called Viva Apocalypse. A rich tech guy developed a satellite network called Galaxy Link, allowing survivors to connect and interact over the internet. As the video wraps up, Parky's attempt at making a toy sheep isn't quite hitting the mark, and it's starting to creep him out. It's been a year since the nuclear war began. The nukes and airstrikes have stopped, but now there's a surge of monsters in various places, and the government is clueless about how to handle it. Normalcy feels like a distant dream, and with the rising number of refugees, bunkers are being attacked more and more. The owners of these bunkers are dropping offline daily, likely due to refugee attacks. Everyone started to turn on each other, and no one wants anyone near their bunker anymore. The sense of community has dissolved into a mess of distrust and fear. Parky also made a smart move by blocking a guy known as Defender. This guy had recently earned the title of Human Hunter in the community. After the war began, he started posting evidence of his brutal killings, not for fun, but to serve as a warning to anyone who dared to enter his territory. When Park eventually unblocked Defender, he discovered that this guy was a serial killer, hunting down anyone nearby. Around the same time, Parky received devastating news. His favorite user, Non337, who used to post videos of making toys for his kids, had also been added to the list of long-term offline users. It's been almost 395 days since the apocalypse started, and winter has set in. People are reaching out to check if anyone's still alive, but it seems there are more offline members than active ones now. Park has gradually come to accept the fact that many are gone, and he's resigned to the possibility that he might be next. While scouting outside, he spots a few people near his bunker. Chief Hong and the crew who helped build the bunker have turned into raiders, and they've come to pay a visit to their old client. Looks like this is going to be one deadly after-sales service, and Parky is ready to handle these guys with the right payment. Park heads over to one of the drawers and opens it, revealing a stash of weapons and supplies. Among all the options, he picks up one of the most traditional weapons and waits for the raiders in the darkness. The next day, the goons outside are prepped for action, but they're confused to find the bunker doors open. One of them suspects it might be a trap, so Chief Hong tells one of his lackeys to investigate. Two lackeys advance cautiously, and soon discover boxes of cigarettes. The lackey quickly reports back, noting something feels off. Chief Hong asks if they can smell any rotting corpses inside. The lackey starts sniffing around, claiming he doesn't detect anything of the sort, but Chief Hong insists they continue searching carefully. Just then, Parky drops from above and lands a powerful kick on one of the goons, sending him crashing into his own comrade. The other goon quickly starts firing bursts, but Parky quickly throws his trusty axe with precision, hitting the trigger-happy soldier squarely in the face. Before the remaining thug can react, Parky delivers a solid smackdown with his feet, then retrieves the axe. With no sense of sympathy, he raises it high and mercilessly brings it down on his adversary. Meanwhile, Chief Hong is still outside, shouting to see if anyone is in the bunker. Hearing the commotion, Parky decides to step outside. Outside the bunker, the bearded goon, worried about the lack of response from his comrades, decides to get inside. But before he can enter, Chief Hong tells his buddy to use tear gas bomb to flush out our boy outside. On the other hand, Parky isn't surprised by Chief Hong's clever tactic. But still, as resourceful as the chief might be, Parky is always one step ahead. Parky quickly slams the bunker door shut, leaving the thugs outside bewildered. Chief Hong, realizing that tear gas might be the key to flushing Parky out, decides to search for the ventilation system. Since he helped build the bunker, he knows that if they can drop tear gas through the vents, it will be game over for Parky. However, Parky has anticipated this move. He grabs his rifle and heads toward a hidden passageway, a secret route he constructed himself after the initial construction was completed. As Parky emerges from the other side, he silently chuckles to himself, knowing that these fools have unwittingly walked into their own death. Meanwhile, the goons are busy tossing tear gas canisters into the bunker, but they're met with silence. Just as they prepare to launch another round, Parky opens fire with a barrage of bullets, taking out the bearded goon with a precise headshot. Seeing his friends dropping down like flies, Chief quickly raises his hands and surrenders before a bullet drills a hole in his head. Our boy quickly asks how many of them are still around, and Chief admits he's the last one alive. But instead of easing up, our guy just presses the barrel of the gun against Chief's head. Chief freaks out after seeing that thick barrel, insisting he's telling the truth and that there were a total of 5 people, including him. After a while, Parky makes this guy haul his friends' dead bodies into the truck. That's when Parky spots something and reaches into the truck to grab a sheep toy. It's probably made by someone whose toy-making videos Parky used to watch. It doesn't take Parky long to realize that these thugs must have killed that toy maker. He slams Chief with the gun and demands he starts talking, and quickly asks what the hell happened to the owner of the doll. Chief tries to brush it off as a misunderstanding, but Park's not in the mood for excuses. He smacks Chief again, hard. Terrified, Chief starts babbling like a cornered animal, saying he didn't kill anyone. He insists there was only one guy there, and that they didn't even kill him. He was already dead by the time they arrived. Park tells Chief to take him to the spot, and after a tense 30-minute drive, they finally arrive at Anon 337's bunker. There he is, lying dead on the floor, clearly the work of someone named Defender. The shot that took Anon down keeps echoing in Park's mind. He's pretty sure Defender is behind this mess. As Park looks at the dead body, he remembers Defender's posts about his victims. He plans to use all that information to figure out how these people were tortured, why they were targeted, and what kind of attitude Defender had toward them. Chief then raises his hands again, asking if he can leave now that he's done what he was told. But Parky just aims his gun at him, causing Chief to recoil in fear. He quickly starts babbling about having kids and how they'll be left fatherless if anything happens to him. But Park makes it clear he's not letting any raiders live, especially since they know where his home is. As for Chief's sob story about kids, Park tells him it's one of the lamest excuses he's heard a million times before. With that, he pulls the trigger, adding another corpse to the pile before heading out. After months of hardcore winter, the warm days finally arrive. For someone living in a bunker, these days are a special treat. You can forget about worries like fuel consumption and just bask in the sun, making every breath feel like heaven. But of course, relaxing in a post-apocalyptic world still comes with its risks, and Park can clearly see a drone hovering around, keeping watch. There's also a buzz about a user named Dongtan Mom, who lives solo in a high-rise building in southern Gyeonggi province. He reveals that he is being watched by a drone sent by the raiders. Dongtan Mom keeps a survival journal documenting all the raider activity, and since he can't really defend himself, he made a threat in his postscript saying he'd consider taking out the nearby Dongtan area if the raiders tried to mess with him. This post not only shared info on the raiders but also pissed off the nearby Dongtan survivors and raiders. For Parky, the post was a bit worrying. You see, the raiders' tactics are changing, and they might have accounts on the forum, which means information that could save someone might also put others at risk. That day, everyone learned a tough lesson. If you can't fight back, you won't survive. So, people started forming their own communities to gear up and protect themselves against the enemy. Parky is a bit of an anomaly among everyone. His thoughts are pretty different from the rest. He figures you might be able to stop raiders once or twice, but the real issue is human selfishness. Groups tend to make you more noticeable, and it's all over once a large force shows up. Armed conflict should be a last resort. Staying hidden is what really matters. In that sense, the area Parky picked is perfect. It's a desolate piece of land where raiders and wanderers have no reason to hang around. Plus, there's a pack of mutated wild dogs that keeps most people away. No one would dare set foot here out of fear. In the nearest downtown area, there were rumors of radioactive zombies, but a survivor apparently dealt with them using a sniper rifle. Parky knows that no enemy force lasts forever. Take these raiders, for example. They're keeping an eye on him with that drone while he's just chilling under the sun, soaking up the sweet sunlight. But then, Parky suddenly vanishes into thin air. The raiders have no clue where he went. As they frantically search the area, they spot another person on the drone's feed near the military area. This woman appears to be American. One of the raiders excitedly tells his buddies they've found their prey, but chaos quickly erupts. The wild mutated dogs in the area start attacking, and the raiders become the prey. In the commotion, one of the raiders in a car hits the gas pedal hard, leaving their friends behind. Suddenly, a corpse falls onto their windshield, obscuring their view. They crash into a nearby light pole, and the impact leaves both raiders in a bloody mess. As the monster outside peers into the wreckage, it takes a vicious bite out of one of their heads. It's been the 458th day of the apocalypse, and news about the raiders of Gyeonggi province has gone viral. This news is a week old already, and it was around the time Dongtan Mom's post had just started to fade from everyone's memory. Then Dongtan Mom posted again, and it's a real surprise to our boy Parky. At first, he thought it was just another attention-seeking stunt. In the post, Dongtan Mom revealed that he's actually in danger this time. He admitted that he lives in Gwangyo, not Dongtan, and that there are at least 5 people at his door. He's begging anyone nearby for help and says that if no one comes to save him, he's going to blow the entire place up. Most people thought it was just another troll post because Dongtan Mom had already been labeled as an attention seeker in the community. No one responded to his plea. When the raiders finally broke into his room, Dongtan Mom was in tears and, true to his word, blew up the entire place. The serial killer defender also posted about a massive explosion near Gwangyo, wondering if that annoying attention seeker, Dongtan Mom, is finally dead for real this time. Parky sees this post and figures Defender might be hiding around Gwangyo. He takes note of this, but he's also got another problem. A soldier mommy who took down his drone with a single shot. Parky heads outside to check out the area near his bunker. He recalls when that sniper lady took out one of the raiders with just one shot. Seems like this lunatic sniper has turned our boy's neighborhood her hideout. While inspecting the scene, Parky notices a puncture where the missed bullet hit. Given the distance between the dead body and the bullet mark, it's clear she didn't give the raider much time to run, and it feels as if she was shooting out of necessity, not choice. The reason Parky is visiting this new neighborhood, where he's never interacted with anyone before, is because of the soldier lady there. Her hair, uniform, and weapon all point to her being an American soldier. When the war started, the US intercepted most of the nukes headed their way to show off their strength as a mighty nation. In reality, they had their own problems, so they recalled all their overseas troops and focused their firepower on stopping the monsters coming through the fissure which appeared in the sky. Parky's worried that if this soldier were to try to reclaim the Air Force base and start searching the area, it could cause him some serious problems. He'd rather avoid a fight with a trained soldier, but he's prepared to defend his territory fiercely if she tries to invade. He'll never let anyone threaten his home. Parky kept an eye on her daily and figured out her routine. He noticed that the gunshots usually stop around the same time every day, which he figured must be when she goes to sleep. This makes it the perfect time for him to approach the building. The main entrance is barricaded, so the quietest way in is to infiltrate from a middle floor of the building next door. After leaping through the neighboring building, Parky hooks himself onto a balcony. If his grip slips, he's a goner. So he takes a deep breath and makes the jump, landing safely on the floor. He quickly pulls out his gun and moves cautiously through the building. He doesn't spot anyone around, but he stays alert as he continues his way up. Parky cautiously opens the gate and sees someone under the blankets. He figures she must be sleeping, But turns out he's wrong. The woman is standing right behind him, and she quickly tells him in English to lower his weapon. Parky raises his hands, realizing she was a step ahead and had been waiting to ambush him. As he contemplates his next move, she reminds him again to drop his weapon. Parky quickly complies, knowing from the sound of her voice that she must be holding a long-barreled weapon, not a handgun. As soon as he drops his weapon, he turns and retaliates. The woman starts firing, but Parky ducks down with godly energy and grabs the barrel of her gun and deflects the bullets, causing them to ricochet off random objects. He then swings his knee and lands a brutal hit to her leg, cracking her bones, which leaves her growling in pain. She collapses to the ground, trying to reach for the weapon, but Parky kicks her hard in the thighs and demands she stop moving. Parky doesn't forget to apologize for being so harsh with a foreigner, but he explains he had no choice. He initially just wanted to scout out how many people were working with her and then leave. But when he stumbled upon her weapon storage, he realized it would be a huge problem if raiders got their hands on it. He reminds her that she should have just kept a low profile if she wanted to survive, but she brought this on herself. Suddenly, the woman shouts for someone to stay back. As Park turns around, he sees another girl, a child who appears to be the woman's daughter. Well, Park finds it hard to believe there's a kid involved. The woman, on the other hand, grits her teeth in agitation and quickly retaliates, making Park recoil in surprise. Just as the woman sits on her feet, Parky quickly aims his gun at her before she makes a move. But in a surprising turn of events, she completely ignores him and dashes toward her daughter, hugging her tightly. Parky almost expected her to grab that weapon and start shooting, but it turns out she's not a bloodthirsty lunatic after all. It becomes clear she's just desperate and overwhelmed, stuck in a foreign land and trying to protect her daughter. Parky kicks the gun from her hands and decides to speak in English, telling her that he lives nearby and advising her not to shoot around if she wants to survive. It seems the little girl understands Korean more or less, so she translates Parky's words to her mother. Then, she looks up at Parky and asks if he has any medicine. The woman lifts her pant leg to reveal a wound, and Parky finally understands why her movements were so slow. He tosses her some anti-inflammatory drugs, and tells her that this medicine is compensation for invading her territory. The woman looks at the medicine and says she needs something stronger to make her forget her pain, but Park tells her that this is all he has got, and she should not really be on drugs at all. He then points to the girl and asks if she can actually speak Korean. From that day on, Parky starts giving the mother and daughter skimmed milk and painkillers at a rendezvous point. Over the past few days, the sound of gunfire has noticeably increased. Judging by the one-sided shooting, it doesn't seem like a battle, but rather a high frequency of gunshots. The way she desperately asked for the drugs made Parky sure she's reached her breaking point. He suspects those gunshots might not be about keeping invaders away, but a sign of the madness she's enduring. Suddenly, Parky sees a flash of light from the building where the mother and daughter are staying. It looks like Morse code, and he figures it's an invitation to meet. He heads over and soon finds the girl, who tells him her mother has fallen sick. When Parky follows her up to the building, he's hit with an unexpected sight. The woman has decked out the place with all kinds of stereotypical American stuff. Looks like to fight off her pain, she's found some comfort in these items. When Parky checks her wound, he realizes she's been constantly attacked by raiders drawn to the gunfire, which kept her from properly treating her leg. After Parky patches up the mother, she and her daughter quickly hug each other. The mother reveals that she wants to stay in touch with friends and family, but is so far from home that even thinking about chatting with them feels impossible. Tears fall as her daughter tries to offer comfort, and the woman asks Parky if he has the strong drugs she needs. Parky stays silent, reflecting on how she looks like a vulnerable mother desperately trying to protect her child. He bluntly refuses to give her any drugs, telling her that escaping reality won't help. Instead, he offers to help by reducing the number of problems she's dealing with, but he'll need to borrow some of her weapons. One fateful day when rain is pouring heavily, Parky chooses this day to take action. The rain lowers visibility, and the cold weather makes people huddle together, making them easier targets. He takes a look at the raiders' weapons and sees they have a lot of RPG rounds and a numerical advantage. But Parky is not stressing it, and before anyone can react, he fires an RPG missile, taking out a man with a single shot. Panic erupts among the raiders as they scatter, desperately running for their lives. Parky takes advantage of the chaos, shooting them down left and right like a madman, turning their once happy night into a bloody, chaotic mess. He keeps up the relentless shooting until someone finally returns fire. Thankfully, the bullet whizzes past his belly without even grazing him. As the raiders start bombarding the area with bullets, Parky quickly vanishes. They're completely clueless about what's going on, thinking they're being ambushed by many people, when in reality, just one person is taking them apart. Then bam, another soldier's down, and soon after, another one takes a bullet right to the face. Parky steps out of the shadows and tells the scared raider that while light might seem safe, it actually makes everyone an easy target. With his axe ready, he moves in, and the guy just tumbles over. As he's staring down his own death, Parky swings the axe and sends him off to wherever he deserves. After cleaning up the raiders, Parky invites the woman and her daughter to his bunker. The curious girl asks why the toilet's sitting out in the open, which gets Parky a bit riled up, who simply tells her to stick close to her mom. But the girl keeps poking around the drawers, and that really gets on Parky's nerves. Nonetheless, once he's patched up her leg, he tells her he followed the video instructions, so she should be good to go now. But even after getting treatment, the lady still feels uneasy. Parky can tell she's still hurting. While he's patched up her physical wounds, there's no easy fix for a broken heart. That's when his eyes land on his laptop, and he remembers there's one thing he can do to help her heal emotionally. You see, he's got the social media of this apocalyptic era, and he tells her to check it out. The lady asks what it is, and if it's even connected to the outside world. Parky explains it's the Viva Apocalypse English forum, and assures her it is indeed connected. She quickly starts typing, and when she gets a response back, she lights up with joy at finally talking to someone American. It's a small but meaningful connection for her. As time goes by, they hit the second Christmas after the apocalypse. A former game developer has created a hit tree decorating game. Parky's tree is empty because he's not very well known, but the trees of more popular users are decked out with comments and decorations. The tree we see now belongs to Defender, and everyone in the comments is calling him a cold-blooded murderer. This only puts a faint smile on Parky's face. Suddenly we hear the voice of that little girl trying to contact our boy through a walkie-talkie. The girl reveals that her mother, Rebecca, is sleeping, and she wants to borrow Parky's laptop later to count down to the new year with people in America. Earlier, when Rebecca and Sue first visited, they shared their names. Rebecca introduced herself and her daughter Sue. When they asked our boy about his name, he did not give away his Korean name, and told them to call him Skeleton because he would rather avoid mispronunciations by Americans. Since that day, Sue has been calling him Skeleton. When she wishes him a Merry Christmas, he feels a warm glow and responds with the same enthusiastic Merry Christmas, wishing them safety. As Parky looks at his empty tree, the system announces that an ornament has been added by someone named John Neenan. This name rings a bell for him, which surprises him because he didn't expect to see it again. Before we dive deeper into this, let's rewind about 4 years when our hero has just started making his bunker. Back then, Parky learned about the internet community of doomsday enthusiasts known as Viva Apocalypse. It operated through a dedicated satellite server, accepting all kinds of information about the apocalypse, even illegal stuff. Anonymous users from around the world contributed to it, making it the largest apocalypse forum, or so Parky was told. He now regrets spending money to join this community, as there's nothing worthwhile other than watching a bunch of wealthy users throwing money around. The only reason Parky joined the community was because he didn't know where to start with his apocalypse preparations, and he now regrets not investing that money into his bunkers instead. Just as he's looking around, something catches his attention. It's the username John Nennan, and this is the first time he encountered this user who provided valuable information on the use of dummy bunkers. The benefits of these bunkers for long-term survival are huge. You can connect them with your main bunker for surveillance, use them to engage potential intruders, and even rig them with C4 to handle any break-ins with a simple press of a button. The more Parky dives into John Neenan's posts, the more he finds them useful. The survival philosophy this man shares aligns closely with Parky's own thoughts, and it's clear that Neenan's thinking is even more advanced. Parky's curiosity about John Nennan just reaches its peak, and he digs deeper to uncover his identity. He discovers that John Nennan's emergence was like a new star igniting the community, known for his exceptional insights across various fields. There were plenty of speculations about who he really was, but Nennan eventually responded in a formal manner, where Nennan showed his hunter's license card. You might also be curious about these people known as hunters. Well, a decade ago, strange phenomena called fissures appeared around the world, bringing monsters through. To combat this, world governments established branches to handle the threat, and these specialists were known as hunters. It looks like our boy was also part of this hunter team, which explains his exceptional combat skills and why he's not just some random high schooler, although it is just my speculation. You see, the identities of top-ranking hunters were considered state secrets, and they're elite professionals with serious qualifications. From John Nennan's license, Parky can tell he's not at that top level, but his posts have earned him credibility with a wealth of knowledge rivaling that of professionals. As Nennan gained popularity and influence, he also attracted some haters who tried to undermine his posts. Despite their weak attempts, Nennan's reputation remained intact. Unexpectedly, John Nennan responded to the trolls, which shocked Parky. When Nennan revealed his face, it caused a major backlash, and everyone turned against him. It turned out he was a D-rank hunter, the lowest rank for a hunter, which was a significant letdown for those who had built him up as an elite figure. Parky can't figure out why John Nennan had to reveal his face. He could have kept posting anonymously, but John didn't stop there. He continued sharing information and even set up an offline meetup. On the day of the meetup, Parky also went to the designated place, where John Nennan greeted everyone with a warm smile and revealed his real name, Sang Hyo-gu, and he is currently working as a hunter. At the meetup, 10 people showed up, including Parky. John Nennan, who was on a diet, told the waitress to serve food for 9 people. However, the waitress insisted he had to eat if he was sitting there, so he ended up with 10 servings. When the food arrived, everyone had a good time. Despite his diet claims, John Nennan ate and drank as if he hadn't had a proper meal in days. It wasn't long before the older and wealthier attendees left with disappointed faces, probably because of his lack of professionalism. As Parky sits there, the blonde starts talking, saying there's going to be a war soon, and China is likely to start it. He explains that there are too many fissures for the world to handle right now, along with a lot of internal conflict. The higher-ups are saying it's out of control. Seems like our boy is just plain disappointed to hear this, because the information John Nennan shared was something people could have figured out, even if they weren't hunters, and it was almost half a year behind. The blonde then asks everyone to introduce themselves. Parky introduces himself as Skeleton. When the blonde asks about Parky's progress on bunker construction, our boy explains that he's run into some trouble and is finding it hard to get a trustworthy company to install a fuel tank. The blonde agrees, saying it's true and hard to find a reliable one. He admits he can't think of anyone off the top of his head either. Parky didn't expect him to know anyone, given his lack of skills and connections. But Parky is shocked when the blonde offers to help look into it for him. John confidently declared that he could find someone to help with the fuel tank issue if he made a few calls. He quickly dialed a number and reached out to his boss, asking if they knew anyone who worked with fuel tanks. Sure enough, Park found himself with fuel tanks installed in his bunker, all thanks to John's unexpected help. Despite the terrible first impression, Park was surprised to find John to be quite a useful guy. With only 401 days left before the apocalypse began, John's offline meetups continued to grow, attracting larger crowds. The last meetup Park attended had around 90 people, but as the numbers increased, the conversations became less relevant, so Park decided to stop attending. However, John took Park aside for a private chat before our boy could leave. After much effort, the blonde finally asked, "Are you a hunter by any chance?" He revealed that he had seen our boy somewhere before and was curious if he might be a hunter. At first, Parky decides to dance around the question, but eventually he confirms that he's a hunter. As soon as John Nennan hears this, he vanishes without saying a word. The crowd starts gathering around John, reminding him that even reporters are waiting to interview him. As they're trying to push him in, the reporter shows up, and the whole crowd shuffles John inside with them. Parky watches John disappear with the crowd, and this is the last time he'll see him in person. After that, John's popularity explodes. He becomes a big deal on shows as a doomsday expert, and even starts his own consulting agency for doomsday preparations. Viva Apocalypse was key to his success, and he became a prominent figure in the community, with many treating him like a guru. Owen Ninan's fame came with its own set of problems. Despite his rising popularity, he faced intense scrutiny from the forum's armchair detectives and cyber experts, who dug into his background and accused him of plagiarizing from the Euroboard. As a result, John's carefully constructed persona was shattered, and he quickly became a pariah within the community. The once admired figure fell from grace, his reputation dismantled by the very people who had once revered him. Rather than fight the allegations, John posted a short but infamous reply that would become legendary within the Viva Apocalypse community. In true degenerate Discord user fashion, he simply replied with, "Your mom." And that's how the tragic end of the famous John Nennan came about. Now we're back in the present, where our guy is still staring at his Christmas tree. All the accusations against John Ninan have mostly faded since the nukes dropped, but he's still curious why John is trying to connect with him. He wonders if there might be an imposter, but there's still a chance it could be the real John Nennan. To figure out what's going on, he reaches out to one of the former game developers who turned hacker, asking if he could shed some light on the person who left the message on his tree. After asking his question, he waits for a while for a response. When the reply finally comes, Fox Games asks if he recognizes the name 180C. But our guy has never heard of this name before, and he certainly does not want to meet someone unexpected. A bit later, a broadcast comes on, telling everyone it's a message from the National Committee for Overcoming the Crisis. They're saying that even in a world that's pretty much toast, having a nation still counts for something. Countless lives have been lost and many cities reduced to rubble, but the committee has managed to re-establish the National Emergency Management Agency before the upcoming election. Director Sang-hoon Lee, who's in charge of disaster rescue, is reportedly still alive and committed to rebuilding Korea. Even so, Parky knows this doesn't mean there's a ton of hope left. It's only a matter of time before things might go completely sideways. Still, he packs up 3 days' worth of rations and water and decides to head out. He wants to make the most of the state's resources while he can. After all, setting up near a city was part of the plan from the start. With that, he's all ready to head out and visit the city of Seoul. After a year and a half since the apocalypse began, seeing his beloved city in ruins hits him hard. He's feeling a mix of nostalgia and melancholy, seeing everything torn apart. There's also a bit of relief in seeing that some people are still hanging on. As he walks through the city, he sees rescue soldiers burning piles of bodies, turning them to ashes. He makes his way to the building where the National Committee for Overcoming the Crisis is based. Once inside, he faces the receptionist and straight up tells her he's there to see Director Sang-hoon Lee. To make things smoother, he flashes his hunter license and lets her know he's Gyu Park from his military academy days. With a smile, he wraps it up, hoping she'll get the message to the director. Here's the lowdown of this organization. The National Committee for Overcoming the Crisis, or NCOC for short, is all about managing and restoring the country. It's made up of Korea's military, administration folks, and former graduates from the Hunter Military Academy. The one running the show is Sang-hoon Lee, a former hunter and the current disaster rescue director. When our guy arrives, the receptionist tells him to hang tight while she contacts the director. But he figures the director probably won't meet him anyway, so he decides to sneak in while she's distracted. Just as he's about to make his move, an officer approaches him. The officer reminds our hero of the current frontline situation, with battles heating up and every able-bodied person needed to defend the country. Park just sighs and flatly refuses, reminding the man that he's already retired. You see, Park has a pretty good grasp of the situation on the front line. Given the nature of this war, quality is way more important than quantity. Instead of just picking anyone like they used to, the military now wants healthier individuals for recruitment. But to him, it's all moot, since in the end, it feels like they're just sending people to their deaths, and he's got no intention of marching toward his own demise. The officer quickly reminds our guy that he's a former hunter, so how come he is turning the offer down? Hearing this, Park facepalms in frustration and asks if the director sent him, but the officer says no. It turns out it was committee member Daram Kim who made the request. This name takes him by surprise, and he never imagined Daram Kim would be part of the committee. We flash back to the past, where we see Daram Kim and our guy together. Our boy is comforting her, urging her to keep pushing and reminding her that as long as they produce results, she'll be forgiven. Back in the present, our guy finally meets the lady from the committee. She greets him, but he shows no emotion. So, she cuts straight to the chase and tells him she needs him to take part in a monster hunt. Parky sticks to his guns, but the lady asks if he's really in a position to refuse given the current state of the world. He reminds her that they had previously agreed never to serve again. She then drops the bomb that this request also comes from director Sang-hoon Lee. Parky's interest is piqued, and he asks why. The lady explains that Sang-hoon holds no grudge against him and is too busy dealing with other things to worry about staff shortage. She's sure our boy is well aware of the front line's daily struggles. Parky, of course, knows exactly what's going on out there, maybe even more than he'd like, and this just makes him sad. The lady apologizes for bringing up such harsh memories, and then asks if Parky has heard of the Tempest Group. She explains that Chairman Poncho J has mobilized his employees and created Tempest Group to tackle the monster problem. But unfortunately, they still don't have enough manpower. They've requested her help, but she's already stretched too thin and doesn't have anyone else to spare. She tells him straight up to just go there and put on an act. If he does that, she promises she'll make sure he doesn't get sent to the front lines as long as she's around. Parky quickly agrees, and as he looks deep into her eyes, he notices that while everyone else seems to have changed, she somehow remains the same as ever. He tells her he'll be in touch again. Meanwhile, there's a buzz in the community about what will happen to the chaebols if the world collapses. A chaebol is a large family-controlled industrial conglomerate in South Korea. It's a topic any Korean would be curious about what they are going to do with their wealth in this messed-up world. Well, everyone's curious questions has been answered when the hideout of Seokju Group chairman Park Cheol-ju has been found, and it turns out they built an entire ecosystem within the walls. Their choice was clear: to live a peaceful life. Parky finds it fascinating that with assets in the trillions, you can definitely pull off something like this. Abandoning the group and status built over a lifetime to protect one's life and loved ones is a rational choice in a collapsed world. Most conglomerates did the same, but as always, some people chose a different path. And Chairman Poncho J is one of those rich people who does not want to abandon their employees and his factory, which is why he established this group known as Tempest Group. Our boy's job with the Tempest Group is set for a month after his meeting with Daram Kim. The Tempest headquarters, designed and built by world-class British architects, was unfortunately halted by nuclear explosions and power cuts. Because of this, he has to take a cramped elevator to the 55th floor, and the crisp, cold air is killing him. When Parky arrives outside the executive boardroom, he reflects on how, back in the day, this was a place only the elite were allowed to enter. As he steps into the room, he notices everyone seated as usual, and Chairman Poncho J doesn't even bother to turn around. A guy in glasses approaches Parky and reveals that he knows Parky used to be a hunter. Our boy greets him promptly, and the man cuts straight to the chase, asking about Parky's rank. Our clueless guy is a bit taken aback to see how this man did not even bother with the formalities. Nonetheless, Park claims he was a D-rank hunter. The man in glasses then probes into Parky's past experiences, and Parky just told everything from his imagination, because most of his records were destroyed anyway, so no one can tell if he is lying. After the man finishes profiling Parky, he tells him to wait outside. And for now, all he has to do is play along and blend in, just as Daram told him to do so. Just then, a woman approaches Parky and says she's heard he's a hunter. She asks if that's true. When Parky confirms, she explains that a group of zombies has appeared near a factory run by the Tempest Group. They gathered some people to respond, but there's only so much non-professionals can handle. So, they requested military support from the committee. Unfortunately, most of the people protecting the factory died. She finds it ironic that, even in such a dire situation, people are sacrificed for the company's sake. She wonders what kind of glory they think they'll gain from company loyalty in a ruined world. To her, it seems like they've lost their minds. She grabs his hands and reveals that her father, Chang Soo-ji, is still at the factory and begs him to save him. She promises to repay him in any way she can, just as long as he brings her father back. Just then, the man in glasses calls Parky over and tells him to follow. When Parky asks where they're going, the man simply says he'll find out soon enough. Before he follows, Parky agrees to help her and tells her he'll do his best, though he cautions her not to expect miracles since hunters aren't gods. Man, it was all good until our boy was alone in the bunker surviving. I don't really like this political stuff. Let me know what you think so far. Also, there are shit-ton time jumps which also might be confusing. Parky reflects on how heavily Korea's economy relies on its sea routes. Some companies have managed to hang on, but their downfall seems inevitable due to the monsters, and the Tempest Group is no exception. He's impressed by their armory, which includes 3.5th generation tanks. It's clear that when the ultra-wealthy decide to build a personal army, they don't hold back. As Parky takes in the impressive setup, a guy approaches and salutes his seniors. This newcomer introduces himself as Sangmin Park, a former hunter and a member of Congress who will oversee the operation. Parky finds it intriguing that he's in Congress and not even over 40. It makes sense though, being a hunter is a hot resume item these days, which is why Sangmin probably got elected as a member of Congress. Once everyone gathers around, Sangmin Park proposes deploying all their troops right from the start. But then someone points out that there are thousands of zombies at the factory and mentions that Sangmin was the one who had pushed back this operation by a month. Sangmin explains that the delay was strategic. According to their research, zombies have a limited lifespan. They keep using up nutrients while they're active and can only last about a month. So, the zombies at the factory should be starving or close to it. The necromancer-type monsters won't be much of a threat without their zombie minions, and they should be able to handle it with their tanks. Everyone is impressed by this insight into zombie lifespans. They then turn to Poncho J, the Tempest Group chairman, and ask for his take. Poncho J thinks for a moment and says that as long as they deal with it quickly, he doesn't mind at all. Well, Sangmin Park comes across as a really convincing guy, and even Parky finds it impressive how easily he's won over all these salarymen. Then Sangmin turns to Parky and asks for his thoughts on the plan. Parky takes a moment, then bluntly says he thinks they're off the mark. This clearly irritates Sangmin, but Parky continues, explaining that when zombies are about to starve, they enter a state of hibernation to lower their metabolism. While it's true zombies will die without nutrients, the factory has been receiving a steady supply of fresh human flesh. Therefore, Parky believes they need to come up with a different plan. You see, Parky doesn't care if the current plan fails and everyone ends up in trouble. He'd rather not be blamed for it later. He's determined to draw the line now to maintain his tranquil, zero-responsibility, reclusive life. He also disagrees with deploying tanks because zombies are sensitive to sound and smell. Using tanks would basically ring the dinner bell for them. Plus, sending in all the troops doesn't seem like a smart move either. All these truth bombs from Parky are clearly getting under the Sangmin's skin. He is feeling agitated, and smugly reminds Parky that no one needs his information from some online encyclopedia. But before he can finish his rant, Parky cuts him off coolly, saying that 90% of a battle is in the planning. And if they're going with a trash plan like this, there's no hope for anyone. Sangmin is finally pushed to his limit and asks Parky if he's looking down on a member of Congress, cursing him out for his trash talk. Parky stays as calm as ever, not giving a damn about someone who's all talk. He's already managed to convince Chang Soo-ji, and that's what really matters. The woman from earlier was his daughter, and Parky's priority is saving her father. He puts a hand on Sangmin's shoulder and tells him he's received a request from his daughter. When Parky gives the signal, Sangmin should make a quick exit. Because, well, he knows that the mission is going to be flopped, and he should not lose his life needlessly. The day finally arrives when stubborn Sangmin executes his flawed plan, and it turns into a complete mess. Zombies swarm everywhere, tanks get overrun, and machine guns can't keep up. Sangmin is about to crap his pants, yelling at his soldiers, but it's clear they're screwed. The monsters coming out of the portals are just too huge for the tanks to handle. As soon as a deity-like monster shows up, Parky tells Chang Soo-ji this is the signal, and he should make his quick exit, since humans aren't cut out to deal with these beasts yet. After the mission, Parky checks back in with Doram Kim. She gives him props for playing the part, and is pretty sure this will knock some sense into the chairman for going with flawed plans. She then mentions that the chairman wanted to meet with Parky, and wonders if he has any idea why. Parky isn't quite sure either, but he's pretty certain that chairman wants a replacement for Sangmin Park, who came up with such a dangerous plan. When Parky finally meets the chairman, he greets him promptly. The chairman reveals that he's looked into Parky's career and is very impressed. There are even rumors that the prestigious Sang-hoon Lee couldn't hold a candle to Parky, especially considering Parky had the legendary saviors Hunmin Kaf and Hye-in Na on his squad. The chairman then asks Parky if he's interested in joining him. Parky already knew much of this, so he quickly puts his cutlery aside and stands up to leave. However, the chairman continues, explaining that he's determined to reclaim the factory. Despite being born out of wedlock and having little chance of inheriting the company, he managed to do so. Even though everyone keeps telling him that the world is in ruins and that it's all pointless, he feels it's time to take up the challenge again for the future of his hundreds of employees and their families. That's why he can't give up and is desperate to find any method to defeat these monsters. Parky can see where the chairman's strong spirit comes from and how he's been able to lead his people despite the odds. Even someone as emotionally detached as Parky can feel the impact of such determination. So, despite knowing that things might not end well, Parky agrees to help. In the end, the Tempest Group's factory mission fails, but Parky is relieved to see that Chang Soo-ji, the father he promised to save, is not among the casualties. This confirms that the daughter's plea was not in vain. Although the Tempest Group as a whole was not entirely a failure in their mission, the chairman, Pancho J, managed to reunite with his employees after becoming a zombie. In a time when many wealthy individuals have abandoned their responsibilities and retreated behind fortified walls, Pancho J's efforts stand out. He has led those who still believe in him and continues to guide them, even in the midst of a world where he and his employees have turned into zombies. Well, that was kinda ironic. In the next scene, we see a lady feeding some cute kittens breadcrumbs. Parky spots this and quickly tells her to stop, saying it could be dangerous. The lady doesn't say anything, just gets up and starts walking away. Parky explains to us that a lot of accidents come from preventable mistakes. He calls it the cat mom incident, which is a bit of a warning sign for him. He goes on to say that it might sound crazy now, but back when the Chinese government was still in existence, South Korea had to send out a hunter unit to deal with monsters coming from China. The monsters were linked to these gates. When the gates first showed up in India, it was a disaster, and soon, other countries in Southeast Asia and China were hit hard too. Korea was next on the list. While he was in China, Parky caught an overgrown sewer rat, which led to discovering weird mutations in creatures near the gates. And this was called the mutation phenomenon. That's why he's concerned that feeding these overgrown kittens could lead to trouble. The lady just shrugs it off, saying there's nothing to worry about, even though Parky had warned her every time he saw her while scavenging. Since she wasn't listening, he decided to let it go, hoping she'd learn the hard way. But he still hoped nothing bad would happen. Just as he's thinking about this, he gets a transmission from Kim Duram. Parky's face twists with annoyance because he really doesn't want to take on another government job. He grabs his head and asks why she's calling. She explains she has one more favor to ask, but Parky reminds her that she promised never to ask him to work again. The lady apologizes and says this situation is urgent. She promises it'll be the last time and assures him he won't be doing a third-party job like he did with the Tempest Group. She tells him there's been a mutation outbreak near the Air Force Base where he's stationed. As soon as Parky hears this, he knows his hunch about not feeding those cats was spot on. The lady reports that several mutated stray cats from the gate have attacked residents in nearby apartments. Although casualties haven't been confirmed, the survivors are too scared to come out. Parky bluntly refuses, saying he can't hunt mutants anymore because he lacks the skills, desire, and equipment. The lady tells him he'll be teamed up with an expert, and when Parky asks who, she reveals it's a hunter who now works as a freelancer. The next day, Parky meets the freelancer, Baek Sung-hyun. Parky introduces himself as a former hunter sent by the council for support. Sung-hyun quickly realizes Parky must be Park Yu from the legendary 13th class, and mentions he's also a graduate from the same school. He's surprised to see Parky here for this kind of job, but Parky prefers to avoid discussing that part of his past. They head over to the scene, which is all smeared with blood but oddly devoid of bodies. Sung-hyun explains that he scouted the area and was attacked out of nowhere. The mutants fled after taking a few hits, as they're still essentially just cats at heart. In Parky's mind, he's pretty impressed with Sung-hyun. Hunting mutants solo is no small feat, because only someone with serious skills and guts can pull it off. Parky figures Sung-hyun must be at least an A-rank hunter, or at least that's how he'd rate him based on his skills. Sung-hyun then mentions he had those mutants on the ropes. He was about to finish them off with a final C4 when someone stopped him. Thanks to that intervention, all those cats bolted, and now finding them again is going to be a pain. Parky has a pretty good guess about who that person might be, and sure enough, we see the same woman calling out for her kittens. Parky watches from the sidelines, certain that if she's calling them, those cats will come running. And just as he imagined, the cats appear at her call. The soldiers exchange looks, load their guns, and prepare to surround both the cats and the woman. Parky doesn't waste a second. He starts laying into the cats with a hail of bullets, and the poor woman screams and cries as her beloved kittens are torn apart. Despite her desperate pleas, Parky keeps up the relentless assault, the mutated creatures dropping left and right. At this point, the woman's grief turns into anger. She rushes in front of the cats, trying to protect them. Just as our guy stops shooting upon seeing the woman standing before him, the freelancer throws his C4. Right before it explodes in her face, the scene transitions into her past. She was once alone and lost, but those same cats found her and led her to safety in a rundown place. She lived with them, finding solace and shelter in their company. Those happy memories contrast starkly with the present chaos as the C4 detonates, obliterating everything in a massive explosion. Parky gives Sung-hyun an annoyed look, clearly disturbed by his cold, detached approach. Sung-hyun just offers a faint smile and shrugs. In this world, he says, we can't afford to indulge in unnecessary emotions. As the arc wraps up, the scene shifts to a plane gliding through the sky. Parky, watching it from his bunker, reflects on how he's been seeing these planes more often lately. Inside his bunker, he's whipping up a batch of delicious noodles. He muses about how people need entertainment, and it's not just a luxury but often becomes a tonic for weary souls. For him, that entertainment comes from Viva Apocalypse. While the forum's initial purpose as an information hub has faded, it has evolved into a sanctuary for true doomsday enthusiasts who survived the apocalypse. Isolated from the outside world, it's become a high-quality community where people share their daily lives and find comfort. It functions much like old-school online communities, where you can post, comment, and like things, Posts that get a lot of likes are featured in the best bulletin board section. And not to brag, but Parky, who under his skeleton persona has made it to the best bulletin board. Parky's rise to fame on Viva Apocalypse came from his clever and restrained write-up about his encounter with Chairman Peng Ho-jae. His knack for intriguing storytelling and the sheer novelty of meeting a chaebol chairman helped him gain a bit of recognition. Around this time, a new post sent the community into an uproar: the announcement of the 7th Hope Lottery. This lottery was organized by the National Committee and was given alongside wages to workers. The drawing was held every 3 days at designated locations. Instead of just hard labor, the lottery added some fun, making it increasingly popular among public workers. The prizes ranged from basic ration items and slightly rare daily necessities for 2nd to 5th place. But the first prize was the real game changer, which was an apartment allocation voucher. These apartments were not just any living spaces. They had self-sufficient systems for electricity and food, and top-notch defense facilities. Their luxurious specs were reminiscent of the hideouts of the ultra-wealthy, stirring immense excitement among the community. People were drawn to the idea of escaping their cramped, unpleasant bunkers, even if only for a few days. The lottery quickly became a hot topic, as everyone dreamed of the chance to live in one of these coveted apartments. And finally, the real winner showed up on the forum, someone with a nickname that had 9 M's, so people just called him M9. Parky remembered seeing this guy at past offline gatherings of the John Neenan community. Back then, M9 was just quietly grilling meat, not making much of a splash. But after winning the lottery, his post blew up with both admiration and jealousy. It was like the reward got to his head, and he started acting all high and mighty, looking down on everyone like they were ants. His new attitude turned the community against him, and people were furious. Parky is skeptical, though. He couldn't understand why, in a time when even simple repairs depend on public labor, the National Emergency Committee would build such fancy apartments just for a lottery winner. He is pretty sure Korea does not have the resources to just hand out something so extravagant to pacify the public. So Parky decides to reach out to Kim Daram after a long while. When Parky calls Kim Daram, he says he has a question about the hope and asks if the government is really building apartments to give out to the public. Kim Daram explains that the hope is basically a mirage. She tells him they're moving to Jeju soon and will all be there by next spring at the latest because there's no more hope for Seoul. That's why Parky has been seeing so many airplanes lately. She warns him not to discuss this with anyone else, as it's supposed to be highly confidential. Parky realizes the reality is even harsher than he imagined. It seems the capital city is being abandoned. Even though he's not in Seoul, living in the bunker feels odd. There's no real distinction between day and night, and the same monotonous meals and worries just keep piling up. Still, he feels a bit relieved that he's not in Seoul and won't be left to die alone. Parky looks again at the post from the lottery winner and wonders if he should share what he knows, even though Daram specifically told him not to reveal anything. He figures that if he exposes the truth about the hope and the national reconstruction being just a bunch of hot air, his post would trend instantly. In the end, he decides to keep quiet, letting the abandonment of Seoul continue. Instead, he focuses on some organic farming and purchases an indoor cultivation kit. After buying it, he throws a bag full of goods at the seller, asking if this will cover the payment. He's trying to trade cigarettes, and the seller quickly agrees. Well, in this post-apocalyptic world, cigarettes are more valuable than gold to smokers. While the workers are lined up for their daily rations and rewards, a commotion breaks out nearby. A few people are looking down on those waiting in line, clearly feeling superior. One woman points out to the rowdy bunch that she doesn't get why they're acting so high and mighty since they're living off the same rations as everyone else. As the troublemakers walk away, a guy fills Parky in on what's going on. He explains that these people are Hope's prospective residents, and they've been causing a stir lately. They started forming their own groups and now act like they're part of some privileged class. Suddenly, a woman announces that today's ration distribution is over. The people in line complain, saying they still haven't gotten their share. The lady sternly tells them to leave because the allocated distribution for each region has been cut. The crowd isn't having it and protests, saying they'll end up dead without rations. Meanwhile, the truck holding the rations speeds off, leaving the angry mob trailing behind. Seeing the distress and chaos, Parky realizes how people are being toyed with in the name of hope. Without hope, their lives feel meaningless, so the government gives them fake hope just to keep them hanging on a bit longer. Eventually, Parky drops the final bomb on the community, revealing that the hope is just a bunch of bull and will never be built. It's all just a mirage. As soon as people hear this, they become sad and even more distressed. Man, this series is wild. It's like a collection of random life snippets from our boy's experiences, with no real continuity. The next scene jumps back to the past, where our boy finally resigns from being a hunter. One of his friends yells at him, asking why he's leaving and reminding him that it's going to be really tough without him. He begs him to come back, promising to talk to the authorities and get him a break. He just needs to endure this one time, and things will surely get easier. But our guy lashes out, asking how his friend can be so sure the situation will change. He points out that by holding on and staying, he's trapping his subordinates in this living hell, making it impossible for them to escape. Ever since that day, anyone who's been to the battlefield knows everything is basically over. So, he tells his friend not to stop him from quitting. Finally, Kyungmin decides to stop pestering him and just says it's raining heavily outside, so he should grab an umbrella. Kyungmin's frustration is obvious, and Parky can hear the edge in his voice. As Parky heads out, he tells his friend to make sure to survive in this hellhole as well. Since he left his comrades behind, Parky has been living solo, surviving in his bunker. Even though he's made it this far, his thoughts haven't changed. He's convinced that human extinction can't be stopped. The overwhelming despair, the shivers, and that feeling of absolute hopelessness haven't faded. All his efforts now are just desperate tries to hang on a little longer. As he's browsing the community, a guy named Keystone mentions there are earthquakes in the southern part of Paju. This brings back memories for our boy, because Paju was the first area in the country where a gate appeared. If you feel localized earthquakes near a gate, it usually indicates the emergence of a giant species. While grabbing his bicycle, he thinks about how the National Defense Committee must be in shambles right now. The destructive power of a giant species is like a natural disaster to humans. It can't be physically stopped. Fortunately, they're vulnerable to Earth's environment, so they start to decay as soon as they emerge from the gates. The bigger they are, the faster they collapse. So it's best to anticipate their path and avoid them, like dodging a typhoon. Just as he steps out of his bunker, a bright, blinding light catches him off guard for a moment. He's sure he needs a forecast to avoid danger in advance. Inside the headquarters of the National Defense Committee, chaos reigns. Employees are frantically rushing around as if a disaster is about to hit. Among the frenzy, our hero Parky is struck by how much more chaotic the place is than he expected. A guy bumps into Parky, spilling papers everywhere. Parky quickly helps him gather the paperwork, and the employee, grateful but in a hurry, rushes back to his duties with the papers in hand. While Parky was picking up the papers, he had noticed that a kraken-type monster is expected. It's one of the more common giant species, usually taking the form of an octopus. But when it feels threatened, it transforms into an armored form. The dangerous part is its death ray, which can penetrate everything in its path and disintegrate any living organisms into nothingness. When the kraken-type monster popped up near Tokyo recently, it wiped out over 50,000 people before it decayed onto Nagano Prefecture. Now it's heading right through Parky's area. If he hadn't spotted it, he's pretty sure he'd be toast. He sees a lady up above who tells him to evacuate because the kraken's path is close to his bunker. Well, Parky doesn't need any extra nudges. He's already aware of the danger. He rushes back to his bunker and grabs his supplies to evacuate. He then remembers the lady's warning and decides it's crucial to alert the community as well. So he posts a detailed warning about the kraken-type monster and the need to evacuate. But his post barely gets any attention, leaving Parky to wonder if his warning isn't enough to make people sit up and take notice. He stretches his arms and decides it's time to evacuate, because he's already done all he can. Before heading out, he catches a transmission from Sue, who tries to catch up with our boy. But he drops the usual chit-chat and tells her to grab their Jeep truck, get her mother in it, and evacuate as soon as possible. Unfortunately, she breaks the news that their car broke down, and the engine's not working, and they're stuck. This raises serious concerns because the building where Sue and her mother are is north, right in the path of the kraken-type monster. There's no time for a rescue, and with the monster heading that way, there's nothing Parky can do to help, and doesn't want to risk his own life either. He advises them to head as far south as they can. Sue agrees, and before the transmission ends, she warns him that heavy rain is expected tomorrow and wishes him good luck. It breaks our hero's heart that in this apocalyptic world, letting emotions sway him is a luxury he can't afford. He remembers a time when his friend advised him to take an umbrella because it was going to rain. That was when he resigned from being a hunter, and his friend probably died while fighting. With that memory in mind, Parky makes a snap decision. He tells Sue to hold on and not to cut the transmission. He promises her he'll be there in 30 minutes or less, and instructs her to get ready with her mom and wait for him. He quickly opens up the inventory where weapons and other supplies are stashed. He needs weapons because a pack of mutant wild dogs lives between his place and the building where that mother and daughter are living. If he wants to get to them fast, he's got to go through these mutts. No room for detours. So he grabs his gun and gets ready to plow right through. He hops on his ATV and charges straight into the pack of mutant dogs. With one hand on the wheel and the other aiming his gun, he starts taking them down like they're just watermelons at a carnival shooting game. He's hitting with such precision that these monsters are losing their heads like they're water balloons. It's a bit of a juggling act, though. Trying to keep an eye on the road while aiming is like multitasking in a circus. He then reflects back on his days as a hunter. He used to be part of a team where roles are usually split into three: the support guy who fries enemies from the rear with heavy weapons, the spotter who coordinates from mid-range with tactical assistance and covering fire, and the assault who tackles monsters head-on at the front line. Our boy has always been the assault, ripping through monsters with the help of his teammates. But right now, he's flying solo and has to juggle both fending off mutant wild dogs and maintaining speed. Just as he's about to reach the target building, he spots a creature perched above. Taking a closer look, he realizes it's the leader of the wild pack. With a howl, the leader summons a whole horde of monsters that quickly surround his ATV. Despite this, he keeps shooting left and right, trying to fend off the monsters. But the leader and its minions are relentless, and he can't take down the leader from this distance with just his pistol. Then, a wild dog slams into his ATV, nearly throwing him off balance. As he regains control, he looks back and realizes the mutant leader is using its minions to toy with him, making him the prey in a twisted hunt, kind of like how humans hunt animals. The leader communicates with its pack in a guttural foreign language, and our guy's taken aback by how this beast is directing its underlings with howls. But as soon as the beast charges, he opens fire, putting holes in the monster while keeping his speed up. He switches to his other gun, starts shooting again, and after a few sharp turns, he manages to shake off a few of the dogs. But the leader beast is still hot on his tail, and he's running low on ammo. Just as another wild dog leaps at him, a devastating shot rings out from nowhere, blowing the beast's head apart and sending it crashing to the ground. Well, it's Rebecca, with her godly sniping skills, saving the day once again. Looks like our guy was worrying for nothing since this is Rebecca's sniper territory after all. Anyway, as more wild mutant dogs show up, he asks Rebecca for a hand, promising they'll be done in 3 minutes. He starts swinging his axe, slicing through the monsters like they're cucumbers. Rebecca takes aim and starts obliterating the monsters in her sights. Meanwhile, the leader beast just stands above, watching its minions fall like bugs. It's clearly pissed, but when our guy glares at it, the beast quickly leaps away and vanishes. The mother and daughter arrive just in time, and the girl gives our guy a heartfelt hug. He tells them they need to get out of there fast. They hop onto the ATV and zoom away, with the sun beginning to rise. The little girl, captivated by the beautiful sunrise, stands up and points at the horizon. But it turns out that dazzling light isn't from the sun. It's actually the dying remnants of a kraken-type monster shimmering brightly even from this distance. It looks like the monster's finally done for. To celebrate, our guy tells the mother and daughter to pose for a photo, and he snaps a great selfie with the monster dying in the background. While our boy is busy clicking photos, someone else is also taking pictures of him. And there is also a woman along with this man. But before we can figure out who this mysterious person is, the scene switches back into Parky's bunker, where we see our boy has posted that photo of mother and daughter into the community feed, and he starts getting a ton of likes and some pretty nice comments. Then, he notices a notification from this serial killer defender, who apparently has made another post of his victim he has killed. Parky curiously clicks on the post to see who the defender's taken down this time. Turns out it's a kraken dying, and one hand in the photo looks oddly familiar. Well, it finally clicks in our boy's mind that this is the same spot where he took that cute photo of the mother and daughter, and the hand in the kraken's picture belongs to the little girl, Sue. Right then, he gets a message from the defender. When he opens it, he sees a photo of himself, which was taken without him noticing. The defender asks if that's actually Parky in the photo. Parky quickly pieces things together. Given the defender's old posts, he probably lives near Gwangyo, so it's likely just a coincidence they crossed paths. After thinking it over, Parky decides to deny it and tells the defender that the person in the photo isn't him. The defender tells Parky to stop lying and claims they've seen everything already. They thank him for the kraken warning, which helped them survive, and then they ask if Parky wants to be friends. We don't know yet if the defender is a guy or a girl, but we'll just assume it's a dude for now, until we get the scoop. Parky figures the defender must have caught his kraken post, even though it barely had any views. Looks like one of those views was from the defender. Parky then hears a transmission from Rebecca and asks what's up. She reveals that a lot of people are entering into their territory. Hearing this, Parky tells her to be careful, and cuts the transmission. Well, it's no surprise to him that unwanted guests have started to enter their territory. You see, after a tough battle with the mutant dog leader last time, the dog pack is significantly weakened and can't effectively block the refugees from reaching Parky's hideout. But that's not even the main problem right now. The real issue is that these folks are camping right next to the generator's exhaust vent, which is the last place Parky wants them to be. The heart of Parky's bunker is the diesel generator, known as the skeleton heart. It's a massive piece of machinery that takes up an entire underground floor and has an enormous power output, but it also pumps out a lot of exhaust. A house with smoke rising from its chimney suggests someone's cooking inside. If Parky runs the generator and the exhaust starts billowing out, the refugees will discover the location of his bunker. But if he turns off the skeleton heart, the bunker's power and the home-like comfort it provides will vanish. In the sweltering pre-summer heat, if the food in the freezer thaws and spoils, it'll wreck his carefully laid survival plans. Given that the refugees don't seem like a group of raiders, Parky decides to try solving this through dialogue. As an old man with white hair is telling everyone to set up their base, Parky shows up with his gun and tells him this is private property. He suggests it might be best if everyone just left. The old man's eyes lock onto Parky's big rifle. A woman behind him pipes up, saying that in a crisis, it shouldn't matter whose land it is. But the old man shuts her down and tells Parky not to worry. He says they're from the pioneering team and even flashes a pioneering permit. Parky thinks this pioneering corps sounds familiar. He remembers an article he saw in the community. The government had moved a bunch of people to major cities for urban reconstruction. When that didn't pan out, the so-called unnecessary people were dumped on the outskirts under the name of the pioneering corps, mostly older folks. In short, as the capacity to accommodate people in the destroyed cities dwindled, those left behind were dumped on the outskirts under the guise of being pioneers. Even though they're not raiders yet, Parky still tells them they've got 3 days to clean up and move out. The old man gets fired up and insists they're state-sanctioned people. Parky reminds him that the state they're talking about doesn't exist anymore, so there is no need for them to stick to the law and stay here. But 3 days pass, and as the next day dawns, there's no sign of them leaving. The old man makes it clear that he won't leave without orders from headquarters. He further explains that if they move out of their designated pioneering area, their rations for their families still in the city will be cut off. They just want to stay for a few weeks. Then an older woman steps in and starts begging. She pleads that everyone here is an unfortunate soul abandoned by their families due to their age and expelled by the country. She insists they mean no harm, and even puts something in Parky's hand as a gesture of goodwill. Eventually, Parky gives in to their demands. His bunker is now dark, hot, and humid, and he's at a loss for what to do. He even considers killing them all, but he doesn't want to harm innocent people without a reason. So, he turns to his laptop, hoping to figure something out. He posts on the Viva Apocalypse community, explaining his predicament, how he can't use the generator because of the refugees outside. At first, the responses are pretty lackluster. But then, Defender sends a message, reminding Parky that these people are potential looters. If their supplies get cut off, they'll likely come after him first and won't hesitate to kill him. Defender advises Parky to strike first to ensure his survival. Parky isn't too surprised by this response, because it's pretty typical from someone like Defender. But as much as he hates to admit it, he somewhat agrees with Defender. Still, he'll have to keep an eye on them a bit longer before taking any action. A few days later, Parky meets up with a guy from the forum. While they're chatting, Parky explains that this guy is Kyle Dose, one of the rare normal users of Vivia Apocalypse. Kyle mentions he found something interesting in a nearby mountain, so Parky decides to check it out. When they finally reach the spot, Kyle points to a tank-like thing. It doesn't take Parky long to recognize it as a capsule, or as he puts it, this thing is their egg. We are still in the dark about who this egg actually belongs to, and the chapter ends